The best thing about an international break is that you can send in great questions that I then reformat to be my own questions, and we ask 3 of them. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot, the Black Man, Twitter, Ink Gunner. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Mailbag episode. I'm going to endeavor to ask your questions as you submitted them and get to as many of them as possible, with the exception of the first one, which I'm just going to make up myself entirely because we have some heritage to live up to. I do want to let you know we launched our 94 Cup Winners' Cup Series from Kent Malmrose, I should say. Pardon me. And we'd love to get your feedback on that. Episode 1 has dropped. Episode 2 will drop tomorrow for all of you who don't subscribe to our Patreon. We still love you. And to prove that, the much ballyhooed and celebrated episode that Clive and John McKenzie did, that I was on for reasons that are still beyond me, is coming out for everybody. So you can hear the Tactics Summit episode tomorrow with John and Clive. So that'll be great, and I hope you enjoy it. But if you want the real sauce, Friday Night Clive will be out tomorrow on Patreon, and we'd love to have you there. We have all kinds of good Patreon stuff coming. By the way, the uncut interviews from the Cup Winners' Cup episodes are on Patreon as well. We've got a One Club women's podcast with Tim and Clive coming over on Patreon, and the continuation of Tim's ever-popular history series. What's cool is we now have collections on Patreon, so you can be like, I've got a long flight, and I want to learn the entire history of the Arsenal. And you could just queue up or whatever the kids do now with their devices and their touch screens. It's all gone beyond me now. You can open up the history collection and just listen to it on that flight. So lots of ways you can enjoy things, and we hope you'll enjoy them. One last bit of news. As you may notice, our logo has changed. I find change terrifying. This is a minor change that I have agonized over. But a few things I want to tell you about the new logo. First of all, we thought it was important to work with someone in our community, both an Arsenal supporter and someone in our community. So Brandon McKenna designed it. I think he did a brilliant job. We wanted it to be referential to Arsenal. So it is based off the concept of the 1930 Arsenal badge from the Herbert Chapman era, when we won our first ever FA Cup, our first ever major trophy. So a pretty special time. That badge design is incorporated in this one. We have an article on our website that talks to you about the design elements if you want to understand what Brandon was thinking, but he included hex patterns in the AV. He made the cannon and a microphone, kind of a hybrid. He did so many really interesting and cool things with it, but it's new. I'm sure you don't care. I obviously, as I said, agonized over it, but it's time for us to have something that we own, that's ours, that was made by a member of our community, and we're really happy to finally have done that. So please send all of your critiques and anger to Paul. I can send you his email when you need it. Okay, enough of that. Oh, last thing. Everybody's getting kind of frustrated with social media, and I understand it. It does really take something out of you, and we want to continue to grow and continue to build the community. So we're looking for ways to do that outside of social media. We're doing more live events. We're doing more get-togethers. If you want to tell a friend about the pod, if you want to give us a 5-star review somewhere, or like and subscribe on YouTube, wherever you consume the pod, that's how we grow. And I think with people understandably feeling like they don't want to be on social media as much, we just love to continue to build this community and make it a place that people feel they can come together. So 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Hope you don't mind. Here with me now is Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hello there. And as a piece of brand synergy, one of the upcoming history podcasts will be on the 1930 FA Cup. So there we go.
See, it all works. Let it all work out, as the song famously goes. And famously of CBS Sports Football, it is James Benge. Hello, James.
Hey, thanks for having me. Big admirer of the logo. I see it looks like one that's primed to muscle in on the valuable Arsenal merchandise market, which so far is cornered by the club.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that people, and by people, I mean, like people in our community that have already seen it have said, hey, that would be great on merch. And to be honest, I hadn't thought about merch yet other than like stickers or something, because just where's the time? But if that's something people want, then we will indeed give the people something they want. And maybe that's another way to help the fundraiser and raise some money for the Zattery camp. So just a thought there. Okay, well, enough of that. Let's do the actual podcast. And so the first question, I think, is the one on everybody's mind. I don't know if you've looked at the table recently, but we are top of the league. Say we are top of the league, and we will continue to be there throughout the international break. And it's got a lot of people starting to ask questions like, is this our year? Is this going to happen? And a lot of people, I think, are trying to interrogate why it might not happen, right? So we had people say, could the attack do this, or could injuries do that? And rather than asking each and every worrying question about why we might not win the league or might not win the Champions League, I thought we could frame it more generally. So thanks to everybody who submitted their specific neurosis, their specific concern. But Tim, I'll ask it of you this way. What can stop Arsenal now? Help me understand the weak points, right? They say steelman the argument, so to speak. So let's steelman the argument for where it could go wrong. What do you see as the vulnerabilities that could prevent Arsenal from ultimate glory this season?
Yeah, as an anxious man, this is right up my street.
you and me, bud. Ride or die.
So injuries, clearly. I mean, that's we saw that last season, right? And even though I think we are better, we're much better set for injuries this season. I think we have already seen that because we've already had plenty, and we've kind of been going all right. But like a big injury to Saka, for example, big problem. Particularly over a long period of time. Big injury, even for Martin Odegaard. I think this team needs at least one of Odegaard or Havertz because they're both such good two-way players, and the options when we don't have them are very binary and very, very different. And so maybe we could learn to play, but like not having both of them for an extended period of time, which so far we're on track to do, so that's great. But either one of those things, because that thing we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, Elliot, in previous years, and on the women's side we're seeing this at the moment, right? Leah Williamson's been injured all season, and basically Arsenal women have followed that pattern that we've seen before. They were okay for a couple of games, and now they're not okay because they can't replace that player, and we've seen that in the men's team as well. We saw it with Saliba. And players like that, or Saka, where you're kind of all right for a couple of games, or Marino up front, and then the opposition kind of works out your weaknesses reasonably easily, and you haven't got that Houdini player who just magically solves all of your problems in those areas. So, I look, big injuries to big players. That it really is as simple as that. I don't have any doubts mentally about the team. I don't think, for example, if they were in the thick of the chase in March or April, that they'd bottle it or whatever else. Of course, if they don't win it, that's how it will be presented, because that's how things are in this day and age. So I think they've been over the line a lot. I think they've done this course quite a few times, albeit not got the gold medal yet, but I think they understand the rhythm and fluctuation of a season. Internally, I really only see it being injuries. But of course, like externally, Manchester City, Erling Haaland could have a Salah season from last season, which he is well capable of and which he has done before. He could score 600 goals. Man City could get 95 points. And then, like, what can you do about that? I don't kind of think they will, but I do fully expect them to compete as well. And if we have another situation where a generational player puts together a generational season and we miss out by a point or two, that could happen.
What about you, James? What do you see as the potential holes in the boat?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Tim in that I think from an Arsenal perspective, it would only be, either superstar absences for an extended period or maybe a particularly targeted hammering in one or two positions, losing Gyökeres right now with Kai Havertz out for several more months. I think that would be really challenging. You think maybe you could kind of shade Saliba or Gabriel for a little while, but if you lost Saliba and Mosquera, it would get complicated. I suppose the other question is Liverpool and whether I believe that they can click to a level where they play to the collective talent of maybe their top 14 players. I think if they did that and did that quickly, they could potentially put together a points tally that Arsenal can't quite match. I've seen them in person a few times this season. Was at Stamford Bridge, which was quite fun. And I don't feel like that's going to happen for a long while yet. Mohamed Salah looks like, well, we've seen this story. We know what this story is. It's Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang after he got the monster contract. Whether it is, he's got his money now, he's got nothing to play for. Whether it's that he got, the adulation that he merited at last season, I don't know. But if I was Arne Slot, I'd be kind of asking questions about whether he sort of fits in my team long term. How on earth I'm going to get all the fullbacks to coalesce together? It kind of feels like a team that's waiting to move on from Salah, and I mean that with the greatest respect. Big I think he's brilliant. But it feels like they've landed themselves in a rebuild season. But that reload could happen incredibly quickly. And then if everything clicks around the new players they've signed, I think they can go to a level that maybe Arsenal can't quite match. But I look at it and I think the bookmakers have Arsenal as favourites, and I think they're right. They tend to assess these things better than most of us in the podcast world or the media world. It feels like some bad things have to happen to Arsenal for them to really slip out of contention, like Haaland being the best player in the world by a long shot, or like Saka, Madueke, and Ranieri getting injured, Gyökeres, Havertz getting injured. It could happen, but that's where I'm at now. I think it's I would make them favourites by a fair way.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is I think in terms of predicting Champions League success, that's anybody's guess because it's a knockout competition. So I would set that aside and simply say that a ball can bounce in off someone's backside and you're out of the Champions League despite having outplayed your opponent. So you set that aside because also when the Champions League gets to its most important and critical stage, that's when fitness becomes most important. And if you are in a title race, I do think, as we saw with the Invincibles, we've talked about this many, many times, would the Invincibles have gone unbeaten had they made it through to subsequent rounds of the Cups? I think that's one for history. But I think, James, you're going where I'm going because I don't see Arsenal going through any period this season where we're not good. This team just has an incredibly high floor, and our baseline for performance is very high. But it is too early to say that either Liverpool or City, in my mind, can't get to a stage of clicking with all their pieces where they don't become ferocious themselves. Liverpool have not been good this season, and arguably we're unlucky because they have more points than they probably should, and it would feel a lot better if they had dropped some of them. For example, not gotten a 35-yard, 40-yard free kick against us, and we'd be a point better and they'd be 2 points worse, and that would feel a lot better. Manchester City have the best player in the world right now on current form, and that's Erling Haaland. And as we saw last season with Salah, that can be all it takes if you're good enough. I think they will be a team that, unlike us, I think City will find it easier to batter the bad teams because I think they have a player in Haaland who cannot be stopped. And, one of the questions, there were so many questions about, could we not win the league because of this? Could we not win the league because of that? Could we not win the league because of this? And James, one of the questions that we got was, do Arsenal have an elite attack? And if you don't think they have an elite attack, have you ever seen a team win a league without an elite attack? And I think that is sort of where my mind goes, which is simply that Liverpool and City, at least on paper, look like two teams that could press the gas pedal with their attack in a way that maybe we don't yet look like we can. And again, we're trying to steel man why we might not win the league, because personally from here, I think we will. But that's it for me. So I'll bounce it back to you, James, and just say, do you think that factor, which for the last several seasons has been the case, that Liverpool and City's attack has just been, at least on underlying metrics, that little bit better than ours, is the attack the area we'd still like to see that we can go to that next booster rocket phase to really pull away?
Yes, but only if you're setting the standards ludicrously high. I mean, we're at two goals a game this season right now, and a +2 goal difference. I think to an extent it's kind of those goals and the XG and everything is coming from the collective, and it's coming not from the best player in the world. It's coming from the best set piece attacker in the world, and maybe the best system in the league, the best collection of talent, so that pre-Haaland, City were winning the Premier League with Ilkay Gundogan scoring a dozen goals.
Gabriel Jesus.
And talking, yeah. And like that was not an elite attack. It was an attack that, or like it was not an elite attack in terms of the individual talent of its component parts, but it got all the goals it needed. And that's probably where you would land on with Arsenal as well, especially if you consider that right now this is an attack that's been light. Kai Havertz, who I think is going to be pretty critical and does, as a centre forward, he does well. He's goal every other game, isn't he? That will add to Arsenal's options. Gyökeres, we're already seeing, I think, fairly swift and significant improvement. and there are still so many other pieces to plug in and play and settle in, like Eze. I don't think it will be a season where someone goes and where if Arsenal win the league, they have the Golden Boot winner a la Thierry Henry. But I think it will. If Arsenal win this, you may well see kind of the scoring output they had in 22-23, where there's a fair few players around a dozen goals, and like that's fine. In many ways, it's preferable to the single point of failure of Erling Haaland's checkered injury history of late, or Mohamed Salah being at AFCON. Plenty of ways of skinning a cat.
Yeah, and I think it's just worth bearing in mind, right? One thing we've seen from City down the seasons is the way they win the league is they look okay, then January rolls around and they win 15 games on the spin or something. You know what we did 2 seasons ago to end the season, they went just enough better than us or just enough similar to us to win it beyond us. So if anyone can get on that kind of form, then that's probably going to be enough to win the league, because I think the league is attritional enough and difficult enough that I'm not sure I see teams doing that to this league in this era. But we'll just have to see. Tim, final thoughts on that? I mean, as I've said, as of right now, I feel really good about our chances. I look at us and I see the strongest team across the board, if not the strongest team in each department, but certainly across the board. Do you have a sense that this is it? This is the season? I mean, it feels weird after 7 games to say that. And of course, these are the kind of things that can get clipped up and look really dumb 2 weeks from now. But, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, look, I predicted that I thought we'd win the league before the season started. And look, things change really quickly, right? Because when we were 1-0 down against Man City a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, might not happen this year kind of thing. I think what we've got in our favour, I was having this conversation earlier this week. Like, I think it's very fair to say Liverpool are in transition this season. I think they absolutely are in transition. I really don't understand why there's so much resistance to that idea. Well, no, I do understand why. I just don't agree with why. And we always said this last season, that last season wasn't the transition year for Liverpool. This year was always going to be. City, it kind of still feels a bit like they are, like away from De Bruyne, Gundogan. Is Bernardo Silva as good as he used to be? How good is Phil Foden? Like they've got a lot more question marks, whereas for us, I feel like we've got like an evolution. We've introduced a new striker into the team. We introduced Eze as well, who's kind of sometimes playing on the left, sometimes playing up front, Zubimendi. So we've got some new players there. But for me, it doesn't really feel like we're trying to drastically change what we do. We're just trying to do it better, basically. Whereas I think with Liverpool, without Trent, they're struggling. They're struggling to answer that question, which was completely foreseeable and got completely lost in the quote unquote controversy and fan reaction and everything. This is a unique player who has been a part of their team for 7-8 years, and there's almost no one like him. So it completely changes the way you have to play. And I think that's a big part of Mohamed Salah looking a bit more mortal so far this season. So and it still feels like City, and maybe as well as moving away from De Bruyne and Gundogan and players like that, still feels like they're working out the Rodri thing. Rodri's got another injury, a pretty convenient international break injury, it must be said, but injury nonetheless. Like, what's happening with him, what's happening with how they defend transitions, etc., etc. The fact that Pep really seems to be very willing to go low block. They kind of did it against Brentford as well as us. And you could say that's totally the pragmatic choice. They don't defend transitions as well as they used to. So maybe that's the best thing they do is Haaland scores and they throw up a big old wall of meat in front of their goal. And now they've got a goalkeeper who's not really a sweeper keeper, but they've gone back to this weird thing where they've got a goalkeeper who's really good at saving shots. And maybe they have gone a little bit back to basics and maybe that really works for them. But I feel like with Arsenal, it's not transition. It feels a bit more like improvement, like maybe slight transition, like Ødegaard and Eze as number 8s. That was transition. That was something different. And I think you could see in the 20 minutes we saw it that we hadn't really done it before. But other than that, I kind of feel like Arsenal's a bit more like home improvement than the other teams.
There's also this sort of sense like, oh, well, Van Dijk will pick up an injury because he's getting old, and, and Salah will fade away, and everything will stay as it is now. But it is possible that Van Dijk will just play at a high level the rest of the season, and Salah will hit form again, and City will stay relatively healthy. Rodri will get fit and stay fit. There are things that you don't expect that can happen. I will just finish this section on this. I think it is very important, if possible, for us to build a lead by January. Now, easier said than done. But the reason I say that is I don't know if I don't know if FSG are willing to fire the money cannons again after all they spent. I certainly know City will be. But if City can find a robust central midfielder that can fill in what they lose when Rodri's not at his best or not available, if Liverpool can find, ironically, something similar, a robust midfielder that can help it so they don't get run through, or maybe one more center back to help them with their depth there, suddenly the things that make those teams look a little bit vulnerable might go away. And if they do that, the run-in could get really interesting because both of those teams have the quality to hit a run of form. I mean, just because we haven't seen Isak at his imperious best yet doesn't mean he won't find it, right? Just because Salah's been a little off the boil doesn't mean it'll stay that way. Just because Rodri hasn't been able to stay fit doesn't mean he won't. So there are certainly paths to it not working out, but I think if we can build some kind of cushion before January when they could go back into the market to solve some of their issues, that would be really helpful. So let's turn to some other questions, to the extent that even was a question. We'll stay on this kind of theme, though, because Matt, home game spoiler in our Discord, James, he asks, do you think in a title race we are better off being the team at the top others have to chase, or chasing someone else down?
Sort of seen what I'm trying to in my head. I'm sort of trying to think what we've seen from Arsenal. Obviously, 22-23 couldn't hold on to the lead, but I know that it sort of gets hurled into the aggregate of Mikel Arteta failure and the aggregate of never winning a trophy. But to me, like, that team was so clearly not ready to win a title that it doesn't really count. And then from that, in 23-24, it wasn't even quite like a proper chase, was it? It wasn't, 1998 and Arsenal just reeling in Manchester United by winning so effectively, and United were clearly spooked whenever Arsenal played, even when they weren't playing each other. I tend to just from the sort of the sense I have of this playing squad, having been around them for a few years, it goes back to what you said, Elliot. I don't think they would fold under the pressure. I don't think it would get to them. I don't think the occasion would be too much because they've now had those moments getting there. So on that basis, I'm going to say what you would obviously want to be doing, which is at the 30 game mark, give me a 6-point lead rather than give me 6 points to make up or whatever. I think they've got, almost to an extent as well, the fact that I could feel quite confident that on an off day, they still won't concede many goals. And so an off day for them might be a 1-1 draw. At the 32, 33 game mark, sometimes that 1 point can make all the difference. If that 1 point comes at the last second and City are watching before their 4:30 Sunday game and they go, that was our moment to draw Arsenal right the way in, and they've now just got that little bit of space. Maybe there's that. Yeah, I think in general, I think this team is experienced enough that you can sort of trust them as pace setters. But I don't think we quite have enough experience of proper title challenges. There's only really one to know for sure.
I think it's dangerous to go down the path of guessing at players or managers' psychology. So I will say it is better to have a lead. You know what I mean? Like, would I rather be 8 points clear at the top or 8 points back chasing them? I'd rather have the points, because you could make the argument that when you have the lead, you're fighting that bottle narrative. Oh, did they bottle it? Well, they bottle it, and that's scary. But the thing I think about chasing, when you're chasing, every single game feels existential because you just don't feel like you can afford to lose any points. When you have a 6 point gap, not that it doesn't feel like pressure, but I think you can go into the game and just play your football, because even if you slip up, it's up to the other team to catch you. I think it's easier for the manager to trust rotation when you have a lead. When you're chasing and every single point is existential to stay as close as you can to that other team. Maybe the manager makes more conservative choices with the lineup, is less encouraged to rotate, and as a result, plays players into the ground. What I will say, I think more important than chasing or leading is playing first versus playing second on any given weekend. I think that can make a big difference. I think playing second can be a big disadvantage when the team playing first, right, especially as one, like if you look at this past weekend where Arsenal beat West Ham and then Liverpool have to go to Chelsea knowing they've already lost their lead in the title race, right? That I think that pressure can be there. So for me, I would always rather have the lead, though. Like, you take the points and you walk away. So I want to ask a player-focused question to you, Tim. We've got a couple of player-focused questions, as you can imagine. And this one I think is pretty interesting from Chef Real on the Discord. What do you think the idea for Hincapié is? He could have signed for plenty of top clubs as a clear starter. So what's really the plan with him and MLS, considering Big Gabby and Calafiori seem to be the certified starters at left back and left center back?
Yeah, the short answer to that is I don't know. I was actually quite surprised by the signing, not least because one of the reasons I think Kivior might have gone is just redundancy, basically, particularly because we've seen Mosquera shift over to left centre back as well. And so I don't really know. I mean, I haven't really seen very much of him, but from what I'm told, he's much more of like I guess your quote unquote traditional overlapping fullback. But it does strike me as odd to have three left backs. And then, he can play left centre back, but then kind of seems we've already got players who can do that. So I have to admit, like, particularly as the last signing, when I thought Kivior was going, I wasn't expecting anyone else to come in. I kind of thought 7 defenders for 8 positions, but with enough versatility within, kind of made some sense to me. So the very short answer is I don't know, and I'm very, very intrigued to see it. I'm very intrigued to see, because obviously we've kind of got 3 left wingers as well now with Martinelli, Trossard and Eze, and it kind of just, I guess it depends on what the combinations are. What are the combinations that Arteta's really going to fall on? Does he feel like he really needs someone like Hincapié when Eze's on the left wing and coming in field and just having those slightly different models? But I do have to say, I do think we will end up, unless there's a lot of injuries, which there could be, I think we're going to end up with some redundancy in there and probably 1 or 2 defenders who probably want to go next summer. So I have to say, like, I'm not like upset at the signing. Like, another good player, that's fine with me. And if someone else falls out in the meantime, then they do. But I'm fully expecting a defender to fall out of that next summer and leave, as Kivior did, because Kivior wasn't playing ultimately. And I don't really see how this ends up any other way. So I'm very intrigued to see, put it that way.
Yeah, I am too. And by the way, if you want to learn more about the player, we did a scouting video over on Patreon. You could check out and kind of see his capabilities to the extent that that's covered in the scouting video. James, I'll let you just quickly weigh in on this because Hincapié obviously has had an injury, so we haven't had the chance to see him yet. Miles already moving into more of an auxiliary role, which is fine at his age. I mean, he could go like this for another 2-3 seasons and still not be close to his prime. So I think sometimes we forget how young the player is, but the England manager's already talked about his role in the England team and him needing to play. So these players are going to get a little bit antsy, especially in a World Cup season, World Cup year. So thoughts on how we might use Hincapié and the fact that we brought him in at all?
I mean, I do think we have to remember, and this is one of the things that sort of was really apparent when I dug around. There was, and there is sort of still a sense that Gabby's had quite a significant injury and he needs to be carefully managed. And I do think we'll see more of him, especially sort of in the Carabao, lesser Premier League games, kind of almost filling in a Mosquera role. And then as well, Ricardo Calafiori, who might be the best player in the league so far this season. I would not, however, be, if I were Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta, I would not be planning around him being available for 38 games a season. And I think we never quite saw with Miles last season the weight of minutes getting to him. But we don't know as well as Arteta and Berta how close that might have been to it all being too much. And I think having a player that can if there's a player I'd want, a position I'd want a third option, it's probably behind Calafiori, much as it hurts me to say it. And I hope, if Calafiori does play 30 plus games this season, I mean, what a season we're going to have, and what a Ballon d'Or contender that will be. So that there is that. I love the player, by the way. I got to see a bit of him in Bayer Leverkusen's title season, where he didn't play as much as people think, but he did offer sort of some of what Big Gabby does when Arsenal are really on the front foot in possession, stepping into midfield aggressively and parking himself at the edge of the area. As he was probably the more attack-minded of Leverkusen's back three. So I suspect Arteta also had a word with Xabi Alonso and said, "What's this guy like?" And got a pretty glowing review, I'm certain.
I think there's also this tendency to just think of players as one position. And really, we have this weird thing where players we regard as fullback options are also really the center back depth. So we know Mosquera is the center back depth. He can't be the entirety of it. Calafiori certainly can play there. Hincapié can certainly play there. Timber in a pinch, but I don't think that's something Mikel wants to do. I think he'll be looking for opportunities to rest Timber, not play him in more positions. Ben White could theoretically step into center back position. But so we have this sort of interesting collection of fullbacks where Miles could step into midfield in a pinch, but he's a fullback. And then every other fullback we have can be a center back option as well. So whether we ever see Hincapié at fullback or see Hincapié at center back, whether that's in League Cup, FA Cup, latter stages of Champions League group phase, we'll see. It is interesting, though. I think it is telling about the pull, as the kids say, that Mikel has, that the club has, that this project has, that players who are highly regarded are willing to sign on to be at Arsenal with an uncertain role, and especially defenders. And maybe it is a testament to the reputation of the club with Gabriel Heinze there now and Mikel Arteta there and the defense that we built, and players who play defense who look at Timber and Gabby and Saliba and look at Kivior's trajectory in his career, and how he's regarded now and certain things like that, and say, I can get better as a player at that place. They're going to make me better. They're going to enhance my reputation. So an interesting one to keep track of for sure. Tim, Alex Gunners on Blue Sky says, once Havertz is back, what do you think is the optimal way to rotate with Gyökeres? Is it one guy starts, the other guy finishes, horses for courses, hot hands, something else? Why? Relatedly, in which types of games would you prefer Havertz over Gyökeres, and why? Not to mention, could they play together, right, in midfield and striker? So what do you think about that? Because we got a lot of Gyökeres questions about his impact so far, about Kai coming back, and I'm curious how you see that. What's the right way to rotate those guys?
Yeah, wrote about this today, actually.
What do you know?
Go. Bingo.
I did see that.
So I said this pre-season that I feel like Gyökeres to me does not feel like the franchise striker. It's not, if we'd gone out and bought Isak's the franchise striker who plays every game that he's available for. I don't think that's who Gyökeres is. If he becomes that, brilliant. I don't think that's who Gyökeres is. I don't think that's who Arteta thinks he is. We got him at 60 odd million, which, in striker money, that's not your franchise player. It's, Declan Rice money. That's your franchise player right there. Maybe even Ezra. I know he was similar kind of price, but strikers tend to cost more, right? So for me, Gyökeres, he kind of does and doesn't feel like the final piece in a way. In a literal way, he kind of does, because we've needed a striker for ages. But I also kind of think this player was probably available a year before we got him if we'd really wanted him. Which is not to say I don't think Arteta wants him. What I'm trying to get at is I think he's probably a tool in the toolbox, and hopefully a very useful tool that we use quite a lot. Nothing too niche, but I'd still expect game for your life Champions League final that Havertz would play up front. I think that is probably who and what Mikel Arteta really wants in his team. However, as we've seen, it's not an absolute catch-all solution, and there are days where you need something else, and we were absolutely right to go out and buy someone else who does something else, definitely. So for me, I think in the game for your life, or in Arteta's perfect game, Havertz is up front. But as we know, the perfect game actually doesn't come around that often. You need other things, you need other tools. And so I kind of think Gyökeres is that, but at a high level, like maybe at like a Trossard level. Again, Champions League final, everyone's fit. Trossard probably doesn't start. He might, but he probably doesn't. But he'll definitely be involved in that game. And, you know, in the run in getting us to that promised land of the Champions League final, he'll have probably popped up with a couple of very important goals. Like he's almost like good filler, I guess. And again, that sounds pejorative, but not meant to be that, you know, a role player, as Paul might say. So the question for me is, to what extent is Gyökeres a role player? Because it can't be like a 10 to 15% of the time when we absolutely have to. It has to be more than that. But is it a 40, 50% kind of thing? Are there certain types of game? Are there certain types of situation? Do you just look at it on the fitness of both players and who's training the best? Like all of that, I think, is to be seen. Are there pairs of wingers, for example, that might work better with Gyökeres compared to Havertz? Like, for example, I think we can see Martinelli and Havertz is a little bit orange juice and toothpaste. Like, I don't think that brings the best out of Martinelli. Whereas maybe working with Gyökeres does, for example, maybe even Trossard, like coming in off that flank and all of that. Like, that's one of the things, a bit like the last question really with Hincapié, that I'm really intrigued to see is, do we end up falling on some partnerships? Because one of the things we have seen this season is just using different players for different games. So Trossard, we didn't want what happened last year at Newcastle, where the whole game's out on the touchline and they just keep smashing us into the advertising hoardings. So play Trossard almost as another midfielder, like, you know, that type of thing. I still suspect, if you really wanted to pin me down on it, it would be about 60-40 Havertz. And in some of that 40, Havertz would probably play in midfield, and it'd certainly appear at some point in the game. I do think Havertz is a really, really important connective tissue player for Arteta in a way I don't think Gyökeres quite will be. But what my expectations of Gyökeres are, be useful enough often enough, and it will be a great spend of money.
Yeah, I as usual, a very articulate and thoughtful answer from you, Tim, but you lost me because after I brush my teeth, I always rinse my mouth with orange juice, so I didn't get the analogy at all. James, I'll let you answer the same question. I'll just say this. I think Kai could also be an obstacle to Marino minutes, because I think that was the original role he was sort of brought in for, and I think Kai with Gyökeres could be a really interesting combination. I don't connect to the anxiety about Gyökeres' performances so far, because I just think if you look at this squad and where all the talent is and where all the spending is, the guy was acquired for less than Eze. He was acquired for less than Kai Havertz. We brought him in to play striker and score goals when he can and be part of the squad, but not to be the superstar. I mean, obviously, you kind of hope for that to happen. He's got 3 goals. The last couple of weeks, I think you've seen real improvement in his performance as his fitness has gotten better and his teammates have learned him. And, you know, if he plays half the games and Kai plays half the games, like, that's a fine outcome. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend he's been amazing. He hasn't. But I think we're top of the league and he's had to play 90 minutes every game. And so you can't discount the fact that he's been involved in that success through a very difficult run for a player to come into the league and have to go Old Trafford opening day and then go to Anfield and also play City and go to St. James's Park, where he, by the way, looked brilliant. I think the guy deserves a lot of credit. So I don't know, James, like, I don't want to overstate how good he's been, because he's not blown the doors off or anything, but I certainly think based on what he's done and where we sit in the league, he's earned his minutes and he's earned the right to continue to play minutes. To the extent that we can give him a break, that'd probably be good too, you know?
Yeah, and look, 60 million, that's kind of the going rate for a squad player if you're competing with Manchester City. I mean, God knows.
Noni Madueke, Eberechi Eze, Kai Havertz. I mean, similar prices for those players. And I didn't see anyone saying Nani has to come in and take Saka's starting spot, you know?
Exactly. I think one of the things that's really intrigued me about the way Arsenal are playing with Gyökeres and how this might feed into what games we see as a Gyökeres game and what games we see as a Havertz game is the real extent to which they have picked up the pace with which they get the ball out of play. I mean, the direct speed stats you see for Arsenal in some of the games they've had this season, especially at Old Trafford, against Olympiacos as well, they were flying forward, because that was, I think, to an extent, it's about exploiting Gyökeres, but it's also going to be about what does this opponent give us? Now, like kind of Tim said, I think when you're in those down in the trenches clashes with City and Liverpool, you're going to need a forward that allows you to hold the ball and have your 2.5 minutes of possession where you probe for gaps and eventually the ball breaks through and Havertz can help get you down the byline and from there you sweep in. I think, when you are playing a team that wants to play in a low block, I think one of the things we're really seeing from Arsenal this season is how can we get into the final third before the Olympiacos defence, the Manchester United defence, whoever's defence is set to meet us. That is why we've seen Ødegaard so aggressive in his passing, I think, and why Martinelli looks like quite a good fit next to Gyökeres, going back to what Tim was saying. So I think we're going to almost end up seeing this sort of horses for courses Arsenal 11s, really. You'll always see when they're fit Ødegaard probably and Saka because they're so good that they're the best player in either of those approaches. But I think there is certainly going to be games where what's really effective is getting the ball out quickly because Arsenal don't need to fear what happens if it comes back the other end. They are probably one of the best placed teams in the world to get into a basketball match because they have Zubamendi, Gabriel, Saliba and Raya. So I think, that's kind of just another way of really saying that Gyökeres could end up just being a little bit of a flat track bully. And that's great because Arsenal's problem last season was they didn't, they went up and sort of threatened to nick the lunch money of the Fulhams and West Hams of the world. And actually they couldn't overpower them. And if Gyökeres gives you that, we see it in where all his shots are coming as well, the games they're coming. Perfect. 60 million well spent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's early, obviously, for any evaluation because this can go down a path where he just gets hot in front of goal and this question seems silly and Kai is backing him up. It could go the other way. There's still some time, by the way. I don't think Kai will be back until November. So we'll just have to see. I want to ask you a question about the Champions League final around the corner. Topical question. About a critical run of fixtures that we have coming up. About Noni Madueke. We got a really interesting question on that, and I think that is one to consider as well. So all of that is coming. But first, I want to do the sensible thing for the health and wellness of this community, which is tell you about brands. So the one I'm going to tell you about now is Indeed. Indeed is a hiring platform when you contract, interview, and hire all in one place. Look, Indeed helps you stop struggling to get a job post seen on other job sites because with sponsored jobs, you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference because according to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Okay, I look at it this way. Hiring has become a real problem for both the firms that are trying to hire and the people trying to get hired. It's a terrible experience. As someone who's applied for jobs, it's no fun. There's an algorithm out there weeding out your stuff. You might feel you're perfectly qualified for a certain job, but that job posting can't find your application the way it's meant to. With sponsored jobs and Indeed, that goes away. And for the hirer, it's better because there's nothing that's going to create a better experience for a company than hiring the people who are most qualified, who most want that job, and who have a good positive experience with the hiring process. So you find the people you want to hire, and the people that want to get hired by you find you. That's the whole point of this exercise. But instead, you spend time on millions of websites with lots of algorithms, and no one has a good experience. Indeed eliminates that and gets results. And in the minute we've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed worldwide data. You only pay for the results, by the way. There are no monthly subscriptions and no long-term contracts. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ArsenalVision. Just go to Indeed.com/ArsenalVision right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/ArsenalVision. In terms of just apply. Hiring Indeed's all you need. Tim, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. So lots of questions about lineups and players and stuff. Before we go to another player question, let's do a lineup type question, Tim. Papa BBS on the Discord says, is your starting 11 the same for these 3 games? And then list these games. 23rd November, home to Spurs. 26th November, home to Bayern, 30th November at Chelsea. Big run, 3 games, North London derby, Bayern at home, Chelsea away. Is your 11 the same for that? Does he need to rotate through that period? How does he manage a situation like that? Because you'll see more and more of that as the season goes on.
Oh, yeah, no way should the 11 be the same for those 3 games. And like, we don't need it to either, because we've got a good deal more than 11 good players. Like, I think we're at a stage now where we could change 5 or 6 players and barely notice in terms of the level. So, like, of course, we should rotate. And don't get me wrong, it should be gentle rotation. I'm not talking about like wholesale for one of the games. But again, I think we've got enough profiles of player now that we can pick according to the opposition a little bit, assuming that we have good enough health to do that. So, we could pick completely different left backs for all 3 of those games. We could pick completely different left wingers. We could pick completely different left eights. If like Madueke is back by then, we could pick 3 different right wingers. Like, we do have like a lot of resource to do that. And I would fully expect 2 to 3 changes per game for that. Maybe not like the absolute, like the spinal players at the but like I reckon like Saliba and Gabriel, if fit, would start all 3 of those games. I reckon Declan Rice probably would. I think Martin Zubimendi is very quickly going to become one of those players. I think we saw that a bit on Saturday, maybe, where it's like, we kind of have to play this guy because he does something, quite unique. And then like the forward positions, again, if Saka's fit, then maybe he just starts all 3 games because he's really, really good. But like the other kind of forward positions, some of those midfield positions, I'd fully expect them to change. So short answer, probably 3 or 4 players who, if fit, will play all 3 of those games. I don't even think we'd have to do that if we didn't want to. Other than that, I'd be shocked and kind of not in a good way if we stuck with the same lineup for 3 games like that.
I have to say, the least important game of that run, as weird as it sounds, could be Bayern Munich. Like, we could put ourselves in a really good position in the Champions League where that game is a nice to win, but not a have to win. You want to win the derby and you want to beat Chelsea away. So if you look fantastic in the derby and you blow the doors off a team and you like that 11 and that's the 11 you want to use against Chelsea, I'd be fine for rotating midweek. I think there is going to be this interesting back and forth discussion all season long about, we have such a deep squad and look at how much we can rotate. But also, if that's not going well, is this deep squad and constant rotation preventing us from finding cohesion? And that's a balance. It's a tough balance because everybody's sick of me saying it, but I do think the best teams start to coalesce around an 11 and really push the gas pedal on it. We did when we went on our run 2 seasons ago from January to the end of the season. PSG famously did last season when they went on their incredible run to the Champions League victory. So balancing between using this immense squad, which is our strength, but also finding a cohesive 11 that can be dominant, that's going to be an interesting one. Let me ask you this from Buyaka. Buyasaka. You know what? From this person on the Discord. James, do you think we'll see the Madueke as a left-wing option again when he returns? If so, how does that impact Leo Martinelli as a left-wing minutes? We got a number of questions on Noni's role when he comes back. Do you think he is the plan for left-wing when he's fit again?
Yeah, I mean, when that transfer happened and you sort of ask around, one of the things that people close to Arsenal, or people with like a knowledge of why this was happening, were saying was Arsenal don't see him as just Saka backup. That's not why they're spending all this money. And we don't know what would have happened with Eze if Kai Havertz hadn't got hurt, but we do know that they really did envisage Noni as someone that could play on the left and has played on the left. He didn't play there a lot for Chelsea, but if you go back and watch when he did, he gave Trent Alexander-Arnold the runaround against Liverpool. So what does that mean for Martinelli, Trossard and Eze? Fewer minutes, I guess, but what I was really encouraged by, even in terms of the intent of it, was Arteta rolling out the Rice as a Ødegaard midfield against West Ham. There's going to be space found for so many of these players. wouldn't shock me if, given the right occasion, Trossard moves infield. We've seen him do that with mixed success. I don't think he's going to move Trossard infield against Tottenham, against Man City, but I think there will be games where he goes, yeah, we can roll with that, and we can see what happens. And if it doesn't work, we'll have Odegaard, Eze, whoever on the bench. Same for, Martinelli. We've seen, I think, can be pretty impactful from the right wing. So the minutes are kind of going to be there to spread around because, everyone was. You've mentioned those 3 games. I believe 3 days after Arsenal play Chelsea, they're at home to Brentford. And then it's away to Villa. So it's not even like that one block is, you can just sort of deal with that and then have a week to reassess. I mean, from after the November international break onwards, it's pretty relentless until a brief pause before Christmas. So the minutes will be there in abundance. And I think Madueke, you guys know I'm all in on Madueke. I think he's going to excel wherever Arsenal put him.
Yeah, I would just say go ahead.
The squad is basically like a walk-in wardrobe at this point. I don't think Arteta will be thinking about what his starting lineup will be like on November the 23rd or anything like that. I think he's just thinking, let's see what I've got on November the 22nd. What's the weather like? What jacket do I have? Do I need to team it with a hat or something? I don't think he'll be thinking I think the way they've built this out is just I want everything, basically. I want everything available to me pretty much at all times, and decisions will be made on how those outfits are deployed almost on the day.
Tim, I'm going to ask you a hard one. And I was tempted not to ask this question because I think it's a question that people will start to roll their eyes at and get annoyed with. And you'll understand, I'm building it up to be a really fun question, right? But let me explain. So over on the Discord, H. Willis 155 asked this question, and then there was some back and forth about the question, and I thought there were a lot of really interesting responses, which made me think it's worth talking about. He said, do you think it's fair to say Arteta has 2 seasons to win one of the 2 big trophies, Champions League or the Premier League? I am a massive Mikel fan. He has taken us so far on and off the pitch, and I desperately want him to succeed. But I think it's fair to say, with the players at his disposal, the time he has had with them, and comparing us to other, quote, big teams, it's a fair expectation to win a Premier League or Champions League title by the end of the 2026-27 season. If he doesn't win, I think we need to look at a more experienced coach with a track record of winning like Luis Enrique. And I, like I said, I was tempted not to ask this question. But what struck me, I'm trying to think of another big club that had a manager that did well, but did not win the big things and stuck around. I know it didn't go great for Alex Ferguson right away when he got there, but obviously in our history, Arsen won basically right away. So that made life easier. But it is simply the case, Tim, that let's say we didn't win it this season and let's say we didn't win it next season, even if we just kept finishing second and kept looking really good and kept getting deep in the Champions League, you wonder how long people can hold on to the idea that we're really, really good if the ultimate success isn't there. And as a comparison, I look at Liverpool, and again, I know social media is not a reflection of real life. There are people that are very frustrated with Slot and now writing off his victory last season as just running on Klopp's vibes and questioning whether he has the tactical nous to win the Premier League. And he literally won it last season. So we're in an immediacy era already, just as a society. We have a manager who's clearly extraordinary in terms of the quality of what he's built and how long now we've been very good and consistently competing for the biggest things. But if the ultimate success isn't there, can that carry on? And I find myself not sure, even though I've always said that's not the best metric to evaluate how a manager is performing.
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair point of view and referring to the question, because I think the thing is, it's difficult to put an exact time on it because you'll know it when it comes, basically. When that point comes where it's like, this isn't going to happen, you kind of know, but it's very, very difficult. It's like... I've forgotten the proper name of it, and I cite this a lot, the paradox of the heap, right? Which is 2 grains of sand is not a heap, 3 grains of sand is not a heap, 4 grains of sand is not a heap. What is that magic number where suddenly it becomes a heap? And actually, you can't put your finger on it. You just know when you see it.
It's 37, by the way.
But like, so why is 36 not? Like, you know
Fair.
what I mean?
Yeah,
like, when
yeah,
does,
when you put it
like,
that way.
you know,
we need the supercomputer from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. You know what I mean? Like to how many grains of sand is a heap and why?
Yeah, but like, I have to say, I do think that if after 2 seasons we've still not won, and particularly if there's no, like, let's say Carabao Cup or FA Cup, that might change the equation slightly. And again, maybe you can say, yeah, but if we get 92 points in both those seasons and someone else gets 93. But I think once you get to the point of 4-5 years of explaining it away, you probably have come to a point where you're like, okay, we've probably hit a bit of a wall here, and it probably does need something else. It could, I think it's unlikely, but it could just be extraordinarily unlucky. We could put up 90-point seasons and just have another team that does 92, 93. And again, it's like, so who is that person that gets us to 95? Because that's incredibly difficult to do. But yeah, I kind of think that's unlikely. I think what Liverpool have shown is if you keep competing, like, it will drop for you one season. Like last season, it dropped for Liverpool, right? Which is not to hand wave what they did.
Yeah.
But it dropped for them because Arsenal and City were buggered for various reasons. But fair enough, they put up a 97-point season once and didn't win the league. They completely deserve to have a season or two, or like the COVID season, and it wasn't because of COVID, because they had it well wrapped up before that, but it kind of happened then as well. Like City just fell apart, and don't get me wrong, they were like, I think they got something like 55 from 57. Like they put up like a hell of a pace. But you know, City kind of fell apart as well. But the lesson of Liverpool is keep doing that every year, and like at some point it will drop for you. I think it's kind of unlike that scenario I'm positing where Arsenal get 90 plus points and still don't win it. I think that's really unlikely. And I think if we don't win something in the next 2 seasons, I think it's more than likely it's because we've come to a point where we need to try something or someone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's the question, the age-old question, is it okay to change for change's sake? You know what I mean? Because to your point, let's say we finish on 92 points this season and lose the league by a point. And finish on 92 points next season, lose the league by a point. And in both seasons, we make it to the Champions League final and lose to exceptional teams by 1 goal. We're clearly excellent. So do you just change for change's sake? And where I start to lean is towards what you're seeing with the players, because all these supremely talented guys keep signing up. They keep re-signing. And all these supremely talented guys who could go start somewhere else are coming to Arsenal to be squad players. And I think that's a huge referendum on Mikel, because the thing that's most likely to win you stuff is talent. And talent mostly wants to be with managers, other than financial issues, with managers that they like and trust to do right by them. So, James, I am sort of a mind that change for change's sake is not healthy, that you're more likely to be worse than better if you're doing that, especially if the players seem so committed to the project. But I must admit, I can't think of many examples of big clubs that have been really, really good for years, but not quite won the major stuff and just stuck with that same project. I hate the idea of ripping up something that's very good just out of impatience. But then again, I am conscious of the fact that the reason we do all this is ideally at some point we would like to win one of these big things.
Simeone and Atleti's probably a fair, and it did happen for them. It did happen for them.
They did win it, though. I mean, if Simeone had not gotten to the mountaintop, if he'd not won a title, would he still be there? Is an interesting question. You know, Klopp famously got to an insane point. What was it, 96 and didn't win the league? 98 points? Didn't win the league? Something insane like that. But the reason there was patience with him when they fell away after that season is he had already won a title. And so, again, he had that in his pocket. James, I'm very clear, and I'll be clear again. I don't think just the trophy haul is the way you evaluate a manager. I think there are better metrics. But I also know the reason we do this is to win these big trophies, and just continuing to do the same thing because it's really, really good may not satisfy people and may not satisfy the players. I don't know.
Yeah, I would really warn anyone that's Arteta skeptic to be very careful what you wish for. I mean, I'm sure there would be, in the event that Arteta left and Luis Enrique said, yeah, I fancy a go at this one, I'm sure there would be a lot of very excited supporters, and rightly so, but I would remind those supporters that, Luis Enrique didn't set the world alight at Roma, for instance, and Luis Enrique has set the world alight when he's been in charge of the most talented squad, so maybe. But to an extent, I sometimes think and I'm as guilty of this in the media as anyone, because they're the people we talk to and they're the people that are the public face. We really overstate the impact of the managers. I mean, I think most sort of analytics people will tell you that a good manager is about the same value as one good player, So pretty helpful, pretty valuable, but may not be, changing them may not be that crucially impactful. And so I even then I look at it and I sort of say, who's going to get the culture? Who's going to fit into Arsenal Football Club effectively? Why did a clearly extremely talented coach like Unai Emery not succeed at all at Arsenal? I think to an extent because he just didn't get to Arsenal. And Mikel Arteta, in the very fibre of his bones, probably even before he arrived at Arsenal, he understood Arsenal and he therefore understood what needed to change culturally, and he understood how to manage upwards. He understood how he understood that the fans all hated each other and that the fans hated the players, and that, I mean, he may not have fixed one of those, but I feel like he may not have fixed either of those, actually, the more I think about it. He's at least made steps in the right direction. And, I think it would be very hard to pull kind of someone off the shelf that knew that and that could. I think we would all sort of talk about how Luis Enrique is going to use Martin Zubimendi. And I would sort of then think, what's he going to be like if the Emirates is getting a bit antsy? Can he deal with that? Maybe he can, but it's such a known quantity that I'm kind of, to answer the question, if Arteta's still putting up 90-point seasons 2 years from now without getting a trophy, I just don't. I think the bigger risk, kind of like you say, Elliot, is just making a change unless the players are telling you, look, the message isn't getting through. Making a change for the sake of it, I don't see the value. And like you guys said, you trust that the breaks will come. We're more and more in the Premier League. It's more like the NBA than ever before, and the NFL and all that. And you know that in those leagues, sometimes you have to hammer at the door for an incredibly long time, and then it's just your year. Everything breaks your way.
Yeah, a couple of things. So one, to your point about managers making less of a difference than we probably think, I agree. I think that the players decide outcomes more, but I think the manager can sometimes decide what players will come and what players will stay. And so Mikel being very good and very well liked and very highly regarded has meant that we've been able to build a more talented squad. And it also means that the ownership trusts him to spend the money to give him the resources, right? So it all sort of trickles down from there. I actually think bad managers can have more impact than a good manager in a way, by the way. And that would be my only other caution. It's possible you change the manager and that next guy does that one tiny little thing that gets you over the hump or just gets lucky. But it's also possible you get the wrong guy and it collapses in on itself. And we're back to being, in the kind of situation that United find themselves in, or we're in 8th or we're in 6th and we're back in the Europa League. And like, however frustrating it is not to win the Champions League and the Premier League right now, this era is 10x what that era was. The players are more likable. The football is more rewarding, and we're competing for the biggest things. Tim?
I think also, and I don't think the original question is guilty of this, by the way, but I think there's also like a culture where it's punitive. I mean, obviously sacking someone is punitive, but it's like, we didn't win it, and that makes me unhappy, and someone has to pay for that. It's almost like sacking someone, for a lot of people, not for all, is like emotional payoff. It's like, I'm upset about this, I'm unhappy about it, so someone either has to be blamed and has to pay for that. And that's not always the healthiest way to look at like moving on from a manager.
Yeah. I want to be clear. I sympathize with anyone who says, but we need to win a Premier League or Champions League. We absolutely do. I mean, we do. It's too long since we've done the one and we've never done the other. Although we did win the Cup Winners' Cup, and you should listen to that series. But to the extent that I think change for change's sake makes sense, look at the players, look at their commitment, look at ownership's belief in the manager to spend the money, and I think bear in mind how bad it can be. and that those things to me would sort of guide my feelings on the matter. So let's move on from that. But I look, it is certainly a conversation worth asking, because I know we live in a moment where it is very hard to be patient. Not that patience was ever in huge supply in football in the past. So totally understand. Okay, James, Dean Shirley asks, if you had to pick a starting 11 right now for the Champions League final based on all squad members being fit and available, who would it be? And we can only ask this while Clive is not on the pod. So this is like catnip for me. Let's go.
Who am I playing?
I don't know that. I don't know.
I'm going to pick Real Madrid.
Real Madrid. Okay.
I just like not.
You've gotten quite a bit quiet, I should say, James, and I'm not sure.
Yeah,
yep.
Am I better now?
You are better.
I'll just address the question. Not play around with the premises of it much more. Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori, Zubamendi, Rice, Erdegaard, Saka, Havertz, Eze. Sorry, that's 11 best, near enough the 11 best players wherever I can put them on the pitch.
Exactly what mine would be. Yep. Nodded along with all of that.
I mean, let's say it's Barcelona. If it's Barcelona, you could talk me into Raya. Sorry, Kepa. No, Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabby, Miles, Zubi, Rice, Odegaard, Saka, Gyökeres, Martinelli. You could talk me into that, and you guys are saying, you're leaving Eze out, that's your guy. But or Noni and over Martinelli, and my argument is simply that looking at how, I don't want to say, the word easy is not fair, but how effectively you can run in behind a Barcelona team. And, I mean, Sevilla just beat them 4-1. They're very, very, very good. But that high line, I mean, Inter, not known for their goal scoring, look what they did in that game against them in the semifinal second leg last season. I mean, that tie, by the way, that's one for the ages. So, I mean, James, do you have some idea that, like, if it's Inter, for example, who's going to sit and be compact and you're going to have to break them down, you know, you might want to go a different way. Eze off the left makes a lot of sense to me. And, you know, Kai, I sort of understand for linking and combining. And, you know, if it's PSG, again, you need a robust midfield. So you've got to try to win in midfield, and we know what it takes to beat them. But Barcelona, you may want to lean into running in behind, and then all of a sudden, Gyökeres, Noni, Martinelli, those players become a lot more important.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I sort of started with that question about the opponent. The only thing I would sort of say on that is, look, you know, none of us have ever seen Arsenal in a Champions League final. And I would hope if that moment would come along, and I would trust with Mikel Arteta, that any changes you make to be the best version of Arsenal more, I wouldn't say entirely, rather than thinking about how you stop the other team, because you're not doing your job as a manager very well if you don't plan for the other team. But if Arsenal did make it to the second Champions League final, sorry, my mind blanked on 2006, which it often does, rightly so. But if you do make it there, and it does go back to 2006 a little bit. In that case, it was officiating that robbed Arsenal of the chance to play the Champions League final on their terms. And you would really hope that kind of you would put yourselves in a position where you can be the best version of Arsenal. You're not kind of cowering in fear at what Lamine Yamal might do to you, or Dembele or Mbappe or whoever, because you can trust that your players will give them a good game. So yeah, of course there's a little bit of horses for courses, but I think Arsenal are so good that to an extent, as much as you can just trust your best 11 to go out and win the day, whatever that best 11 is. I know Clive doesn't agree with such a thing. Yeah,
well, but in our, there's no subs allowed in this Champions League final, Clive. I'm sorry, so you have to pick your best 11. You know what's kind of interesting, guys? Can I just make a really quick observation? We'll ask another couple quick questions before we get out of here. One, I think this is interesting. If you think about the best 11 you guys pick, only Zubamendi and Eze are new additions, right? And I think Eze off the left, if you said we got to do Martinelli there, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Zubamendi, the obvious one. But I think it's just a reminder that we probably massively underrated the squad last season and felt it needed some overhaul or something, when what it really needed was fitness. Turns out when you play without Kai and you play without Odegaard and you play without Bukayo Saka and you play without Gabby and you play without Timber, and you're starting players that you had no plan having in the team, and you've got Butler Ederje on the bench as your only option to change the attack. Yeah, the squad can feel underpowered, but now we look at it and we're picking Champions League finals where 9 of the 11 players were here last season, and maybe 10. So, just an interesting perspective on that. Tim, I don't think we have to go too deep on this, but we did get questions on it, and it is sort of in the news, so I think it's worth addressing. David Barrett asks, would a stadium expansion and a potential move to Wembley disrupt the, quote, project? Is another 10,000 seats worth the risk of interrupting short-term successes and potential trophy wins? I will just point out that we could be 5 years away from even starting this project on the stadium. By that point, we very much will be into a new era of Arsenal, led by Ballon d'Or winner Max Dowman and elder statesman Ethan Nwaneri as captain. But
coached by Jorginho.
Yeah. I was going to say Cesc, but I won't say that because I don't want people to get mad. So, just pretend I didn't say that. But let's set aside the time frame. I mean, what do you think about that? The fact that we're in a really nice era of Arsenal. I assume it'd probably be more than one season to do this, maybe 2 seasons. I'm guessing. I have no idea. Let's just say. I mean, what would your thoughts be as a season ticket holder, as someone who wants to go to all these games, having to go to Wembley, not being in our spiritual home, during a period where maybe Arsenal have one of the more talented squads in the world. I mean, it feels like the Emirates could use a refurbishment and an expansion. I can certainly see the value of it, but what do you think about the trade-offs there?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a bit like moving house yourself. It's horrendous. Like as a first world adult problem, by the way, moving house is one of the worst things you can do to yourself. It is stressful. It's expensive. It's awful, but you just have to trust it's a couple of months, and then hopefully I move into like a nice house that doesn't cause me any trouble. Which I didn't, incidentally, which is why I wasn't on this podcast
for you, the better.
For a few weeks.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. It might just have to be done. Real Madrid had to do it. I think Real Madrid had a bit of a stroke of luck because they did a lot of that during COVID when there weren't fans allowed anyway. But Barcelona have had to do it as well. I mean, Spurs went to Wembley and they didn't win anything. So like that must be the barometer for clubs not winning anything, but like not ideal. I don't like Wembley as a stadium. It's incredibly difficult to get to. It's much better than it used to be, like because there's actually stuff around it now, but still not a place I'd like to go every week, to be honest. But if needs must, and if out the back of that we get like a stadium renovation that really, really works and it works for like 50 years and the club make more money and blah, 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 like I'd tolerate it. But I think a lot would depend as well on what are the stadium modifications. Is this for more like corporate seating, for example, which would be great for revenue, but not necessarily for atmosphere? It looks like they're thinking about, potentially it's all feasibility at the moment, I think, is the kind of message. So it might not even happen, but they're looking into it, but getting the roof a little bit higher, getting that up at a little bit more of an angle. Like, I think it sounds like there are odds and ends that if they can get them all add up to something better. And I'm kind of up for that. I think Arsenal were unfortunate at the time they opened their stadium. Like everything just changed literally at that point in time. And now you're looking much more at like multi-purpose entertainment arenas and all of that. And when things like concerts come around, and a lot of this is local council led as well, like, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium's getting NFL, it's getting boxing, it's getting Beyonce and all of that. There's like West Ham's stadium, which is kind of their stadium, I guess, like that gets all of that stuff as well. Wembley's done a lot to become much more all-purpose, so that like when they have like an Oasis concert at the end of September, for example, they can turn that stadium back round in a couple of days rather than a couple of weeks. So all of this stuff has kind of happened underneath our feet. And I think it's right that we're at least looking at what we might be able to do. And look, Wembley holds like 90,000, I think. So if nothing else, probably a good litmus test for what the demand actually is, and so and it might be as well. I think with Wembley there are only so many events they're allowed to hold a year, so there might be some games where like the capacity would be slightly reduced, but like not much below like 60,000. So it might even just be a good dry run for saying like new stadium's going to be 75,000 or whatever. Here's Wembley for a year or two, and let's see what we can do with that kind of size of crowd. Let's experiment with ticketing a little bit. How can we be dynamic, but not dynamic in a Ticketmaster, again, Oasis concert kind of way, but dynamic in a kind of, it's Brentford at home on a Wednesday night. Maybe we can extend the family enclosure, it's probably like good grounds to experiment with stuff like that.
Yeah, look, the naive me says, more seats, maybe ticket prices can come down and more people can get to the football. Obviously, more seats could mean better atmosphere. This is a really hard one. I mean, could the Emirates use some upgrades and some refurbishment? Like, I think so. What's feasible? Well, the one thing I will say is that we have an owner who is a real estate developer and was involved in developing one of the more impressive stadiums in the world in SoFi. So, there's that. I'm sure you will have access to all the best people thinking about how to solve this problem instead of getting into the knotty issues, because it's an international break. We don't need to take that on ourselves. I think there's a question, James, that I'll throw to you about this. Kevin Essington asks, if money, infrastructure, and permitting were no object, what would you upgrade, modify, and change about the Emirates? So instead of, is this bad, is this good, how about what changes would you like to see? If this project is greenlit and you can go develop the Emirates however you want?
It's a very good question, because I think maybe before this recent run of form, I probably would have blamed the atmosphere on the Emirates itself, and I think we've probably seen that's not quite true. It's never going to be a Goodison Park, but Everton have just moved out of Goodison Park. It's never going to be an Upton Park. The only way to create that atmosphere is to have 30, 40,000 people in quite an enclosed space where, if you happen to be in the press box there, and look, I'm in a very privileged position when I'm at the Emirates, but I wasn't in a privileged position when I was in the Goodison Park press box because my knees were breaking every time I went.
I'm so sorry for you, James.
I know. Life's
terribly sorry. Yeah.
But, that was the only time life was a struggle. I think for me, one of the things I'm really intrigued by is, as a relatively local resident to the Emirates, did the Kroenkes sort of envisage a new Emirates being the place, kind of like the Spurs did with their stadium, that you rock up 2-3 hours, you spend an hour in the club shop, then you spend an hour and a half in the bars at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at the Emirates, and then you spend an hour afterwards there. I don't think that would be the right Emirates Stadium, like for me. And, we can only have our own views of that. I don't love the idea of it becoming a cash machine. I know it needs to become a cash machine to an extent. But I think one of the great things about this stadium is it really is in the heart of a vibrant community. And, do you pull in people that you just kind of lock them into the stadium? I know that wouldn't be true for the fans that had been going for 20, 30 years. They will have their routines and they will stick afterwards. But on match day specifically, I hope it doesn't kind of force its way into becoming a mothership that blocks out kind of the wonderful North London environs. My only other, just kind of going back to that question about Wembley, I think it would be horrible. I think it would be worse than we think, predominantly because, like what Tim said, it's awful to get to. I'm going there tonight, basically from near the ground, and it's an hour's journey. It's going to be an hour's rubbish journey of kind of going into London to come out. And I get the feeling that those December, January night games, when people are going to Wembley, as much as it'll be exciting to let new fans in, there'll be an awful lot of regulars who are absolutely hating it by midway through that season.
Yeah, look, we don't know how many years we're guaranteed on this earth, and every year that you don't get to go to the Emirates and be at the home of the Arsenal stinks. And so if it were 2 years of being away from the Emirates and being in Wembley, I'm not going to argue with anyone who says, I don't want to do that. even if it stands in the way of progress. But it sure is a thing the club are trying to do. And so I think it is a thing that will become a reality. My only hope is the Emirates is a place that more people can go to when they're done, that it has an atmosphere that sizzles and pops a little bit more. Although, as I've covered on this podcast in the past, I think at all the big clubs, there are always games where it's a bit of a lull when you beat up on the dross of the league. And, in a game that's a little bit boring, I don't care if you have 90,000 people there, you're going to get the atmosphere you get. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Let's wrap up with two good, quick questions. The first one, Tim, from Neil Shannon. Has any player surprised you so far this season, even non-Arsenal players, as in surprised you by how good they've been playing or how poor they've been coming in? And who's a player that has been a big surprise for you one way or the other, Arsenal or non-Arsenal?
That's actually a really difficult one. No one really with Arsenal. I think we know these players quite well. I guess non-Arsenal, I've been slightly surprised so far at Florian Wirtz. I thought he would have been better. He doesn't look terrible to me by any means. But, and don't get me wrong, I was aware that it was going to lead to a bit of a change in shape for Liverpool, going more to a 4-2-3-1 and away from 4-3-3 and all of that. I was expecting slightly more from him, particularly because they got him quite early in the summer, had the full pre-season, etc., etc. However, I do think there are other issues with Liverpool, Trent being one of them. So I'm a bit surprised that hasn't gone as well as I thought it would. I did also think that Matthias Cunha might be quite good for United, actually, in a way that Coutinho was good for Liverpool at a certain level until they wanted to challenge for the title. I think United have got so many problems that having a guy that picks ball up, runs towards goal, smashes it very hard was actually quite a good starting point. For them, I think you can question maybe Mbeumo and maybe even Sesko, but I thought Cunha was probably a decent fit for a club who are trying to get back into the top 5, top 6, and I know he's been injured, but that just hasn't really happened at all. Isak didn't have a pre-season, so I do think, I guess that's one of the things we should have talked about earlier as well in terms of what can go wrong. I do think Isak will be very good for Liverpool once he gets fit and once he just
is good. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's wishing him to not be good is going to be disappointed. I think he's just going to be good,
and that might make the Salah thing a little less pressing as well. It does look to me with Wirtz and Isak that Liverpool recognise that Salah's not going to do what he's been doing forever. So I guess those are a couple. I wasn't really that sure about anyone Man City bought this summer, to be honest, when I compare them to the level of De Bruyne, Gundogan, even going back to Sterling, Sane. I do think there has been an overall drop-off in quality at Manchester City. So, yeah, those are the ones. I'd have to think about it a bit more, but those are the ones that kind of come to mind.
The Arsenal one for me is easy. It's Mascara. I mean, I would not have expected a player of his age and experience to be able to come in and look as comfortable at Arsenal. And it's not that he's been absolutely perfect, but he's been pretty damn near. I know he gets criticized for giving away a corner, but giving away a corner is not giving away a goal, and it can happen to anybody. But other than that, he's basically been foot perfect. So really impressed by him. I agree with Wirtz. I was all in on his talent, and I just think it hasn't completely worked for him. And we see some of these sort of slight Bundesliga stars come into the Premier League and struggle. Jadon Sancho is another one where I was he's just going to tear the Premier League up the way he was playing at Dortmund, and that never happened either. The dribbly, technical guys who find the space and time in the Bundesliga to star, sometimes that doesn't translate. I would say if I was going to put another one, it feels like they're all Liverpool focused, but just the extent to which Gyökeres has been a dumpster fire there too. That has not worked. Frimpong has not really worked. And what do you know, losing one of the best fullbacks of all time has been a problem for them. So interesting stuff going on there. James, a quick surprise, either the good, the bad, or both?
Yeah, Jeremy Doku, I thought Pep would lose patience with him, and I'm not surprised when you see how good he is that he's persevered. I didn't know how good Elliot Anderson was until this season. He's very good. And then I think, is this every Liverpool player if I say this guy? Jeremy Frimpong?
Yeah,
I thought Liverpool knew what he was when they signed him. but they're trying to play a right winger at right back.
Yeah, I don't see the point there. So, and it is interesting because it seems like Slot wants to have more control than he did last season, but he bought flying fullbacks who want to be up the pitch, and it's just a little incoherent to my eye. So, last question, and I think James, you'll have to come up with one you can pretend you made because yours aren't on record like ours are. But Tim, topside righty in the Discord says, based on these first few games, which of your preseason predictions are you now most and least confident in?
Who on earth has assumed I can remember my preseason predictions?
How about ideas you think you thought, and they don't actually have to be predictions, but things you went into the season kind of feel, what do you feel is still most true, or that you would change your opinion on from the start of the season?
That's really difficult because things have gone pretty much as I thought they might.
Well, that's good.
In terms of like points totals and all that, and obviously we had such a different context with like the like we started on the outside lane of the season, right? So I was always like, get through this kind of first bit. And I never thought that Arteta was playing with the handbrake on or wanted 10 guys behind the ball. That's not the football I've been seeing for the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm utterly astounded that people think that they've been watching that. I find it amazing. So like genuinely nothing. But I kind of also think it's a bit too early as well. I guess maybe I've been slightly surprised at the extent to which Martinelli and Trossard have still been really important players. Like I didn't think they would be completely like Siberia'd, but actually they've probably started more games and made more contribute. Like if you told me in mid-August after the Eza signing that like Martinelli and Trossard, I think they lead us, don't they, for goals and assists so far this season, obviously because Saka's been out. Like I think that would have surprised me. To be honest, but obviously there's a context in Havertz and Saka being out. So I think it's too early for that. I don't remember everything I said. That's part of it. But also things have gone pretty much as I thought they might. And like, for me, a surprise would have been someone being really bad. And yeah, I don't think I've seen that yet. So yeah.
Look, there's nothing wrong with being a certified genius, Tim, so it's fine. The upsetting thing about looking at our preseason predictions is we did them before Eze was signed, and so there's some things there that stand out. When I look at mine, a lot of us picked Noni Madueke to have the most left-wing starts, again, before the Noni injury and before Eze was signed. You did have Leo as an underperformer of the season prediction, Tim, and I would say as of right now, I don't think he's tearing up trees, but he's been okay. So that might be one that could be changed. What about you, James? What's the thing you believed at the start of the season where you're like, I was dead on about that, or one that you feel you might have been wrong about?
Happily working for a US media outlet, like half of what we do is predictions. So I'm quite across everything
Us Americans and our predictions. When will we learn?
And I will keep providing them for you. Well, I mean, from an Arsenal specific perspective, I did not see what Arsenal would get in attack from their fullbacks coming, even Calafiori. I mean, if you look at the sort of very early, very small sample size, but you add up Calafiori and Timber's XG per 90, and you're way over half a goal per 90. I never, obviously, I watch Arsenal, so I know that Mikel Arteta doesn't play 4 centre-backs and 3 DMs every game. But I've still known that, especially someone like Timber, the quality is really defensive, but the reason we're talking about him as much as we have of late is he's come on leaps and bounds in the final third and is really starting to get in positions to influence the game there. Otherwise, I mean, I kind of felt it coming with Liverpool, but I still said I thought they'd win the league, and I thought Havertz would be the player of the season, because I think sometimes we all get carried away on talent, and I firmly believe that Havertz is one of the most talented players to come to the Premier League in years. And I think we all trust too much that talent alone will just come together and will just make good almost immediately. So I got that one wrong. I did, however, pick West Ham to go down. So I'm feeling really good about that. If a little bit, I was sort of there thinking, come on, Potter, hold on. If you can just make it to Christmas, I will look like the smartest man in the room.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at my predictions, I mean, I think so far, my top 5 prediction, which was Arsenal, Liverpool, City, Chelsea, and Newcastle. I still think I'd pick that to be it again right now. The one I'm feeling the least confident about right now is I had Victor Gyökeres being our top scorer. And as it stands, I mean, it still could happen. No one's running away with it, but I'm not sure. I think that looks good. Maybe my worst prediction was goals allowed. I had us allowing 32 goals. And as it stands right now, we may come in under that impressive number. Defensively, we look really, really good. So, look, all things right now being equal, this is a really nice moment in the Arsenal world. We sit in a good place in the Champions League. We sit in a good place in the league. We have a lot of good players. We have some that are going to come back from injury soon. We have some that are just going to start to kick on, like Bukayo Saka. I will say that I don't think the Martin Odegaard injury is serious, in quotes, in that I don't think he'll be out too long. And we're in a part of the season where hopefully we can start to really see the flair side of our game develop. Eze to be more integrated, Gyökeres to maybe have a little more of an opportunity to stamp his authority on the league. So I'm really excited for what's to come. We'll have Friday Night Clive tomorrow. If you don't want to go over there and listen to that, you will certainly have the Clive and John McKenzie pod over here. You have additional Cup Winners' Cup episodes coming. Just trying to do a lot of stuff to all be together and have a nice time. And if you have thoughts on the logo, again, I'll give you Paul's email. You can send any complaints to him. But if you love it, certainly reach out to me anytime. Okay. This one's gone on quite a while for an international break. Thanks for hanging with us, Tim. I really appreciate you. Thanks, man.
My pleasure as always.
We will have a One Club episode, I think, coming because there's a lot to discuss in Arsenal women world. So stay tuned for that. Little technical glitch, my fault on that. Otherwise, it would have been out yesterday. James, way, way overdue, but always very much appreciated. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you ever so much. See you guys soon.
All right, everybody, we will leave it there. So, who do we play next? Fulham? Yeah, there you go. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10. Fulham, no.